Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening again. My name is Elizabeth, and I will be starting on the second week of the AWS Cloud Path series. In this series, we are looking into AWS infrastructure, AWS services, implementing them, and building solutions like hands on, getting hands on with AWS. So, yes, this week we are going to be looking more at our setup, our environment setup. And I also mentioned that I would explain like the AWS infrastructure. There's not much on it, but I think it's very, very vital to understand what AWS is all about for you to get the main thing you want out of AWS. So yes, I think I'll touch on the infrastructure first, and then we'll go right back into setting up our AWS environment. So here is a page I have for the AWS global infrastructure. I think I should increase it so that everyone can see it very well. This should be better. So yes, the AWS global infrastructure essentially just refers to everything that AWS has set up all around the world for you to use. There's a reason people are moving to the cloud, migrating to the cloud. There's a reason you are watching this video. You've heard of AWS somewhere, or you've heard of cloud services somewhere, and you want to, take advantage of all the benefits and all the nice shiny things that you hear about the cloud. Everything depends on this global infrastructure thing. We're talking about, it may be cheaper to use cloud services to do really cool things, because if you want to do it by yourself, you would have to set up all the infrastructure around it and all the security and all of that, blah, blah, blah. And that's why you want to take advantage of the economies of scale that the cloud providers offer. So you're able to do same things as really big companies without having to spend the money that they could have afford to spend, and you wouldn't be able to spend to set up a whole team to get that done. Everything depends on this global infrastructure thing. So yes, how are they able to make it happen? There's this quote that I keep remembering every time I think of the cloud. I don't know who said it or where it was from, but I know it's a meme that my friends usually share. Like, there's nothing like cloud. There's nothing like the cloud. It's just doing things on someone else's computer somewhere. And no matter how ridiculous that sounds, it's just really true that we talk about, cloud services, cloud solutions, cloud. There are no computers up there in the cloud in reality. It's just a bunch of servers, data centers set up like very well with, the right best practices and all that somewhere, and you're able to use them. Yes. So the AWS global infrastructure, I'll try to break it down in the levels that they are, so you would know what you'll be working with when you start using the services. You know where you want to put your stuff, or where you need to put it for some compliance reasons, or how you want to make it really highly available and all that. You need to understand the AWS global infrastructure. Yes. So the main thing is the region. When you log into your AWS account, you can see the region that you are in. I think it's good for me to open the AWS console so that we can walk through it together, not just seeing it with our mouth. But yes, let's go to the console. Console.aws. Aha, now the account that I opened. What's the account ID? Let me check it. I have it in my email. I made sure I sent the email. This is ein Moment, bitte. Okay, here it is. Account ID, we have 9111. This may not be the account I used last week to show you how to set it up, because I closed that. That was a very temporary account. But this is what I'll be using throughout this journey with you, because I've set this up properly. So the username I'm using, same username, I'm just using dev. You want a more descriptive username for all the things you do, but yeah, dev, and the password I would just And remember this account sign in. Fingers crossed it is correct. Yes. So you can see there's no multi-factor authentication set up with this. It's not the root account, and you can see there's a lot of access denied stuff here. But what I was talking about, let me make this bigger for you to see very well. When you log in, beside your username here, you can see the region that you are in. This is the region. This is like, I like to think of this like the top level, like, what's the top level? Yeah, top level of all the options you have. Like, you cannot pick whether you want to you can pick whether you want to use AWS or not. But after picking whether you want to use AWS or not, the next choice you would pick is, okay, I've picked AWS. Which region in AWS do I want to use? So now you can pick whether you want to use Europe, Stockholm or not. And a lot of times, you wouldn't even be using their names. I don't even know their names really. I know Frankfurt is EU Central 1, but what you want to know is these codes beside them. These codes, you'll be using them a lot in your command line interface, in your programming, or anywhere you're picking stuff. This codes that you'll be seeing. Can you see where my mouse is? This one beside it on the right, the hyphenated text on the right. So yes, everything you are doing would have different choices that you can make depending on what kind of services that they are, but you would be able to pick where you want to deploy your services. There are some that are like really global services, but we'll be looking at all of that. But yes, understanding the global infrastructure of AWS, there are 36 launched regions, and in these regions, you now have availability zones. Yes. So when you pick a region, like EU Central, I like to use EU Central because, that's where I am. EU Central 1. In EU Central, you have, let me just sum this in. It's the same as what I did, but yeah. In EU Central 1, you have 3 availability zones. It goes A, B, C. So if I say EU Central 1A, I'm talking about an availability zone very specific inside EU Central 1. There's a particular availability zone. I don't know if you've had time to look up on this page, but basically there's a lot of like solutions showing you what is existing in AWS and all that. It won't make sense for us to start reading all of that on this call, but these are the main ones that you want to know of: the regions, the availability zones. Then you can maybe go deeper with edge networks and all the regional edge cache locations, but you wouldn't be dealing with that with every service you get. So it just depends on what. But in deploying regional services and all that, you would want to know your options and how you want you to set stuff up. So a region is an area, like in the world. It depends on how you, let me show you what I'm talking about. It depends on how you want to group it. Like region is North Virginia, Ohio, North California, Oregon. Like it's a region that you really contain maybe your data policies or this GDPR laws and all those kind of things. You can decide, okay, I want this data base to be based in Frankfurt, that's in Germany, or I want this to be based in Ireland. So a region is basically I don't want to say city. Maybe state is closer to it, but it depends. It's a region. It determines what it is: Central Canada, Paris, Stockholm, and all that. And then the availability zones are like locations, like the whole data center set up in that place. So EU Central 1A availability zone is located separately from EU Central 1B availability zone. So if something happens to all the servers or whatever that is in EU Central 1A, EU Central 1B should still be running. Do you get? Except if something happened to the entire EU Central 1, then that entire region goes down. And this is where you start to think of, okay, how redundant do you want your services to be? Like, what level of reliability do you want to deliver in the cloud? So for you to be able to deliver high availability or like solutions like that, you need to really understand the setup of the global infrastructure and how you want to, recover, or how much time you have to get stuff back up. Maybe you want to make it redundant on the availability zone level, or you want redundancy on the regional level. Like, okay, if this entire region goes down, we're able to spin up another region in EU West 1, for instance. But yeah, let's not go too deep into devil stuff. But I just thought you would want to know about these different things, because also to say this, services don't cost the same in all the regions. Are you listening to what I am telling you? Services do not cost the same amount in all these regions. I'll give you an example. Let's look at something here now. Let's look at the AWS calculator. I think I showed you last week. If you read the calculator.aws, here you're able to estimate stuff. Every time you are estimating services, they usually tell you to estimate based on the region, because the prices you're going to get for a lot of services, or maybe some services, may be different. And also, it might interest you to know that not all solutions or services are available in all the regions. There are some things that are available in a particular region that you will find it difficult to get in the other region. For instance, there was a time that I was providing a solution, and the client really wanted it to be in a particular region. I would say, okay, maybe the client wanted it to be in Ohio, like for their reasons, maybe their partnership agreements or whatever. They needed this team to be located in Ohio, this deployment to be located in Ohio. And when we were designing and trying to set up, okay, this is what they would like to set up, maybe this database, this EC2 instance or whatever. And you realize that, okay, this particular instance type that you want us to select for this server is not available in Ohio. We have to pick an alternative, or we can choose to deploy it in the region that it is. So yeah, it's really different. You need to know that when you are picking your solutions, you need to consider which region is going to be in, how much it will cost in that particular region. So you don't go calculating costs with a wrong region, and you'll be surprised when AWS charges you like ×2 of that. I'm exaggerating, but you get what I mean. You need to know where you are deploying stuff and what you want to deploy. Yes. So I think we shouldn't go too deep into the global infrastructure, but there's a lot of things: the local zones, the direct connect locations. This is when you're dealing with hybrid connectivity. You want to connect your own local centers, your local environment directly to AWS. You can use direct connect connections, and yeah, there's still a lot more, but you can go into it in your own comfort time and get familiar with it. This is the overview. We have the regions and the AZs. You get to see all of them like close up. The local zones, you get to see it close up. And yeah, sorry, I wanted to show you. I've already gone to another place. Yes, wavelength zones, the regional services, to know which kind of services are available on a regional level. There are some that are global services. You cannot select a particular region for it, for instance. And yeah, that makes a lot of difference. I think Route 53 is a global service. So if we go to check Route 53 right now, you would see that here is written global. You're not able to select a particular region. Let me make it bigger so you can see it. Here we can see global here, and you cannot select a particular region because Route 53 is not tied to a particular region. So yeah, a lot of things like that differs. And we can get right back to what we were talking about, the whole CLIs and all that. I think I should close this since I'm not using it. So yes, here we have this. Tools to build on AWS. So I mentioned setting up our CLI environment. Setting up the CLI environment. First of all, I want you to know that CLI, SDKs, everything else wraps around the AWS API. Yes, it wraps around the AWS API. And there's a lot of different solutions that you can use. This C++, you might find yourself using JavaScript or Python. I know Python uses Boto3 library, but basically there's a lot of wraparounds or SDKs that you can use with the AWS API, but essentially everything is accessing the AWS API underneath. So you're able to perform commands in your AWS environment using the AWS API. I want to say this because you may be wondering like how some services work, like, oh, you're using the CLI, or you're using the console, or you're doing this and you're still able to, I'm talking about CloudTrail now, but we'll get there. But it's still able to monitor what you're doing or how you're, everything is just using the AWS API. So whether you're going via the console, whether you're going via the CLI, whether you're going via the SDK, you are calling the AWS API. Here we have AWS CLI. These are command line tools. So this is general AWS CLI. You have PowerShell tools you can install. You have your EC2 AMI. AMI is Amazon Machine Image. Yeah, I think. Like EC2 is AWS solution for instances. EC2 instance, sorry, solution for like deploying servers in AWS environment. So when you say an EC2 instance, think of it like, oh, a server or something like that. And you have particular CLI tools, or I will call it, CLI tools for some AWS services, like the Beanstalk CLI. You can install it. It's not with the full AWS CLI that you have all the different services there, but this is more specialized for Elastic Beanstalk. This one is more specialized for ECS. Same goes for Amplify, and then SAM, that's the serverless application model. These are some AWS services that you will get to use, but they have the specialized like CLI endpoints, and this is the copilot that you can set up with your environment too. So what we're looking at today is the AWS CLI and the, oh no, this is communication and collaboration. I was looking for the, is it? These are SDKs for the AWS. No, it's okay. Okay, yeah, it's up here. Like all the different SDKs for different languages. So you can pick one that you prefer and you go with it. I've still not decided if I want to work with Python or JavaScript for this journey, but I'm thinking I would lean more towards Python. Maybe we can always try it out. But yes, let's start with the CLI. So we have the AWS CLI, and that is essentially you need to give me a moment, and I would like to take a moment, please. I'll be right back. Okay, thank you for waiting. So yes, I'm right back. I needed to share the live stream link with some people that didn't know where to find us. And we were looking at the command line tools. Yes. So we're getting started with AWS CLI. We want to set that up today. And also yes, maybe we can look at what is in the SDK. But the AWS CLI, we're going with this, and I'm going to walk you through it like as if I'm experiencing it for the first time. I can't remember when last I installed the AWS CLI. Yes, because it's something you just set up once and you're done with, except maybe you change your system or something. But so the command line interface is one of the ways to interact with the AWS API. They say here it is a unified tool to manage your AWS services. So even after you have set up a lot of things, you already have your console working, you have projects deployed and all that. Sometimes the fastest way to check what's going up with something or what is going down with something, basically sometimes the fastest way to get answers from AWS is just to go open your CLI and run a single command that gets you something like, okay, AWS this, that, and you're able to see what you are looking for. So you are able to control different AWS services with this central command line interface. Remember, I mentioned there are some that are specialized for particular services, but this one, the AWS CLI, literally covers like different services, so you can just really just install this and you can get the same format to interact with different services. Yeah. And how it works, this is, I think you need to, let me just send this in the chat for my chat is closed. But yes, it's aws.amazon.com/CLI. That's where I am. And you can always look at it more closely. The link is in the WhatsApp channel. You can always look closely at the dev tools and then check out the CLI particularly. And yeah, I wanted to show you what's up here. There's a lot of guides. The documentation is there. You can have a look at it. Yes, because this is all different AWS services that you can interact with. I like that the AWS CLI literally uses like the same format, like it's like a template of writing the services, like, oh, AWS describe this, AWS is describe that, and you're able to get the same like results in a way with different services without having to learn a lot of new commands. So we'll get started back here. Yes, to get started. Yeah, we don't need to go through all this. So the prerequisite is that you have your AWS account, you have IAM credentials. We're going to need that. We haven't created that in our AWS account. We have an IAM user, but we've not created the credentials that we can use in the AWS CLI. That's something we'll see. Yes, but this is. Let me make it bigger so we can all see this. Remember last week I told you that you shouldn't use your root account for anything really. That's why we created this other account. Today, whatever you are doing, don't log into your root account to perform these actions. We are using the separate IAM user that we created. It's not your root account, and we are able to work with that instead. Starting, we're going to be installing the AWS CLI. I'm going to follow this command. Okay. Install the AWS CLI, and I'm using a Mac OS. You decide whatever it is that you are using, or you install exactly the way you want. That's why I don't want you to follow my exact stuff. But working through this process together, you are able to, get from literally the very homepage to where you want to be, not just dictating commands for you to follow. So yes, we're installing this together. Mac OS, it says GUI installer. Oh, it depends. I think I would prefer to use the command line for the current user. Yeah, you can do that. But then that's a bunch of code that I would have to be sharing with you. Let's just go with the GUI installer. We'll install this. It's downloading, and then I'm going to install it. It's loading. So the thing is, with this GUI, you can have the same kind of installation experience with the command line installer. Here in the command line installer, you can see there's the option for all users. There's also the option for only the current user. For the GUI, you also have that option. Yes. So go through it, install the CLI, continue. Software license agreement, continue. Please read your read everything that you agree to, okay? Don't just click through it like me. Read what you're agreeing to. And I'm installing for me only, not all the users. Continue. This is what I'm installing. And yeah, install. So why this goes, it shouldn't take much time. But you can see the instructions here. I think the problem may be that because I already installed generally for my entire, like for all users. But yours should go very well in this last step. This is because I already installed for all the users. At least that's what I did when I installed on in the other user account. And I hope to find it there when I go, because that would be different. Move to trash, yeah. So yes, you could run it for all the users on your computer, or you could run it for only the current user. Yes. So let's check what we have here. I should have it installed already. Which AWS? I need to open the terminal. Let me see. Can I open it here? I don't know why I thought I'll open it there. Terminal. So we are going to be checking which AWS. You can see it's already installed here in my computer. And you should have a result. If your installation was correct, it should bring you the path where your AWS installation is, your AWS executable is. And let's check the version. Okay, why are you taking your sweet time? Aha, there we have it. AWS CLI 2.17.43. We have Python 3. Why did you show my Python version and everything? But yeah, this is everything that it's using. And there's a comment here for those that may run into issues in this process. If you are having issues with AWS or AWS version, just restart and try again. If not, there's a link here for the possible errors you might encounter, but I hope you're not encountering any issues actually. So this was for the Mac OS. There's also the instructions for Linux, there's instructions for Windows. So yes, I don't have the luxury of trying with every single kind of system for you, but this, going through everything that we've gone through so far, you're able to get here and take your time to explore and read through all the possible things about the CLI. It's all on you. So now we have installed the CLI. The next thing that we would want to do is to configure our AWS CLI. We could go back here to see what's all here, but it's still the same thing. We want to configure our AWS CLI. So I'm closing this and we'll continue. So right now you have AWS in your terminal, but AWS is not able to do anything in your account. AWS is meant to be secure, yes. It shouldn't allow just anybody to run commands in your account or get information from your account. So we have to configure access for your local environment to be able to run commands and actually see results in your console. So yes, here we have it. Credentials, AWS credentials. We have to configure our AWS credentials. I said that we created the IAM user, we created the separate user, but that user does not yet have programmatic access to the environment. It has access via the console, but we haven't yet configured any keys or any secrets that it can use to, configure access from outside the AWS console. So we need to set that up. But I want to show you this. All the different options with AWS. It's a lot. Yes, it's a lot. But it's not impossible to understand everything. I just want to run through it because it's good to know. So there are different kinds of access rights and all that you can configure for access to your AWS environment. And this is the order in which they take precedence. The first one is the most important one, that it takes first above every other thing. And this one is the last one it's going to take advantage of. So if you have multiple different kinds of credentials somehow set up, which is a bit messy, you wouldn't want to do that. But if you have different kinds of credentials you have credential in your file environment, you have credential in your command line, like when you put the command there, you have credential, like so many different things you put instructions or credentials in. Basically, it's going to take the one that is in the highest order here first before everything else that is there. So yes, if you set any command line option at the point of making that command, that takes precedence over everything else that you have set. So for instance, in your environment, you may have configured it and said, okay, this is the user that I am using. This is the user profile that I'm using. I'm using the dev user profile in this command line. I have set it to the name, the access key of the dev user. If I'm making a command and I write profile admin, even if dev user is in the terminal or whatever profile I have configured for that admin is what is going to use to run that particular command line option. So sometimes it may be useful to you that, okay, you don't want to change your entire local environment access or setup, but you want to run a command particular to another user that you have configured in your environment to. You can mention that user profile directly and tell it to use that. If not, it's going to use the default profile that you have put in that environment. We're going to see everything, yes, but I just want to let you know the command line option topmost. Then you have environment variables. Like once the environment, we'll see it, the environment variables that you can configure, like AWS access key, AWS secret access key, or something like that. And then that is what it will take next in the level of precedence. So if it does not find or you setting a profile in the command line options, it's going to take the profile that is set as default in your environment variables, and then these other ones are more complex in your setting up, but you would encounter them. So the assume role is, there are AWS roles. When we're looking at different ways people can access, there's the user and then there's roles, which you will look into. But assume role has to do with AWS roles. So I don't want to go too deep into that right now. And we have the identity center. This one has to do with it's a more complex setup, and you mostly do this when you have like organizations and bigger people in your account environment that you want to grant access to, and maybe you connect external login, like maybe your Google account in your company, you connect it with AWS, they're able to log in with their SSO, blah blah. Or you can just have users that you create an identity center and they are able to log in. Like there's different ways you can configure user access in identity center. But the point is, all the users in your identity center, they correspond to just a user in your AWS environment that they can log in with SSO. And the reason why I like that one is because even when you have different accounts in your organization, you can easily just assign access to different users. Like, okay, this is how we have access to this account, to this account, to that account, like multi-account setup. And that all works fine in Identity Center. But yes, we digress. So you always have your credentials files. It exists in your system. Once we start configuring this thing, you're going to see it. And all the credentials you configure are usually stored there. Credentials and your configurations file, everything you configure, they're usually stored there. AWS credentials file, AWS config file, they usually exist and all that. So basically there's a lot of different ways that it picks which user is going to give access to blah blah blah. Some that are not very useful to you, but we're going to be starting with the beginning ones. Those are the ones that really pertain to us, yes. So, authentication and access credentials for the AWS CLI. We're going there, yes. I would say the first thing for us, okay, we're already here. The first thing for us would be to configure our credentials in our AWS account. Remember, I said that we haven't yet configured that in our AWS account. So we have our IAM users, that's what we're going to be using. We have our IAM users already created, that's step 1. This is where I am, authentication access for an IAM users. We have our step 1 already done, and now we want to get our access keys. So we're going straight to our AWS console, and we'll go to the IAM service again. So console.aws.amazon.com, and we are here. Now I'm going to go to this IAM service. This sorry. Yeah, I think because of our restricted access to these users, we have not created access for them for the IAM, but we can do it by ourselves right now. So I'm going to log out of this, sign out, and I'm going to log in with the root account so that I can give that user access via the CLI. So the root user, you would have to do the same thing. Go to your root user. I think for me this is acp@updatethegirl.com, and this one has multi-factor authentication set up. Never. Let me try this. As usual, I can't remember the passkey that I use for this. I remember it's in the browser, but it's not this browser. So I probably would need to give Amazon another round of, yeah, they're not matching passkeys. I'll have to take another option. Let me see. Sign in using alternative factors. Send verification email. I had to do this on the last call too. Here we are again. I think because I keep using a different browser, I need to check this email in a moment better and verify the email. Yes, now they should be able to call me. You're welcome. Aha, okay, so now I should be able to sign into the console. I just signed in on my phone instead of signing in here. Oh no. Yeah. Let me just sign into a different account. I'll sign in again. I think I'll use this one. Oh, finally. So yes, this is the root account. Sorry for the roadblock. I need to find a solution to moving my passkey to this browser. But yes, this is the root account, and we want to go to the IAM to grant access keys to the user that we created. So this is the user dev, and it has console access. It does not have MFA enabled for easy login, and yeah, I think this is the user. So let's look at their security credentials. They have the multi-factor authentication 0 and access keys 0. We need the access keys to set up. You can see you use access keys to send programmatic calls to AWS from the CLI. You use it for all those AWS dev tools like the SDKs and all that. You use these access keys to configure all the commands that you'll be working with. So I'm going to create an access key. There's a lot of options here, and I'm going to use command line interface. You can set a lot of different stuff. I'm not going to be using these alternatives are not going to be working for me. AWS Cloud Shell is CLI in the AWS environment, basically. It's not going to be on your local system. And there's AWS CLI version 2, yeah. But yes, we're going for CLI because that's what we're setting up right now. And I'm going to understand this, and next. You can write anything you want here. I'll just put it MCP. That's what I used to call my MacBook Pro, so I just know where I want to be using this for my MacBook. Create access key, and there we have it. So you have this access key, and you want to keep this secret. Yes, you want to download it. You want to let me just download it so I won't forget it next week. But this access key is what we're going to be using for our configuration. Back to where we were. Here you get your access keys. The instruction is here. So you go to the IAM console, you select the user, then you create access key, follow the instructions, and you download the CSV. That's what we just did. Now the actual configuration of the AWS CLI. What we want to do is these 4 main things you want to set for your CLI. You want your access key ID, your secret access key. Remember, we have them here. This is the access key ID. This is the secret access key. There are 2 things we have here, the ID and the secret access key. And then we want the region that we want to be connecting with. You know, I mentioned that you always want to specify the region you're working in so that AWS knows where to put your stuff. If I go to a particular service in AWS now and I deploy things, I set up whatever, and I just switch to another region, that page will become empty, as if, oh, you have nothing deployed here, you have no services here, you have nothing, no resources deployed and all that. So your region determines where AWS puts your stuff. You put on AWS region, you put the output format that you want to be getting from AWS. It's usually JSON and stuff. But these four main things, once you configure it, your default profile, that's what it's going to be using by default. You don't need to specify it every time. Yes. So you can see here the profile, and then it's default in the credentials file. And that's what it's going to be using for commands that don't include any specific profile or anything. It's going to use the default. So yes, we're going to be using this AWS configure. That's what we're going to be doing. So I go back to my CLI, I run AWS configure, and it's going to ask me for all those things that I just showed you here. It's going to ask me for all the things so AWS access key, we'll get it from our IAM, and then place it here, put it down. AWS secret access key, I get it from here, and I put it here. The region name, I'm going to be using the EU Central one, that's my default. But if you're not sure what to use, you can always go here and check the regions. Like I mentioned, it's the name on the right that you want to be using. You don't want to be writing Mumbai or Osaka or Seoul or Sydney. You want to write AP-South-1, like I wrote EU Central 1 like this. It's the region code basically you're going to be using. And the default output format, I'll just leave it as none. You should use anything it wants. And that's all. We've configured this. Like literally we're done with configuring our AWS CLI. So you can run commands now and it's going to work. Now, you know I mentioned you can have different profiles and all that configuration in your environment. This is how you do it. What we did now, we ran AWS configure just like that. So this is saved as our default profile. But if you want to name different profiles, like AWS configure profile dev, AWS configure profile prod, AWS configure profile crazy, whatever you want to write. But you can add as many profiles as you want, but you just need to make sure you add this profile tag and put the name you want to refer to that profile for any command you want. So you can configure different IAM users in your environment, and they are stored there. And after you are able to make use of them as needed. If you mistakenly run AWS configure without the profile tag, you're going to be changing your default setup. You're going to be changing your default profile that is there, the default region, the default everything that you have there. And I mean, if you do that by mistake and you're not aware of it, that can be very, very expensive, very expensive mistake, because when you run AWS command without it, it's going to deploy things in the wrong account or set up things in the wrong user. So you want that to be done properly. Yes. And with that, we are majorly done with setting up our CLI access. I have shown you what options you have in configuring your CLI. We use the IAM user option. You can set environment variables if you want. These are more options that you can check. Basically, more options that you can check. This is the CSV file you downloaded. You can use AWS configure import and you name that file, the path to that file, and it will set it up for you. Or you can use the config and the credentials files. They exist. We can check them out. Let me show you where it's at. Okay, I have to put this, what it is here. This file, is it there? No, this is the wrong command. I wanted to open this. Yeah, I wanted to go to see the methods. Let's see what we have here. You're supposed to see the user profile is not configured in my environment. Yeah, I haven't set that up. Let me see. I think it should be at the AWS. But basically it exists in, let me see where we are at. It's not there. We need to go to cd dash so cd users are they should be there. That's yeah, we have them here. Config and credentials. So both of these files, you can use it to configure your assets directly. All the things that I have done here today, configuring our default profile, everything is already saved in the credentials, and you can go back there and change it. So this is what you see in your credentials, what you set just now with all the default stuff. It's going to be there and you can change it. So there we have it for our CLI setup. I think you should have your AWS CLI ready to make things happen. So yes, this is example of using the AWS CLI. You can explore all the options you have, running commands straight from here. So instead of having to go all the way there to get stuff done, you can actually just open your CLI. Let me clear all of this. Open your CLI. Let me go back to the home, please. You open your CLI and you are able to just run the commands to do something in AWS. Here we have examples of the AWS CLI command. I want to give you just a quick, let me see if just a simple one. Yeah, let's just do the AWS list instances. To check the list instances. This is long. All these commands, this is long. Yeah, so this is list snapshots. Let me just see this. It should give you nothing really. Let me see. AWS EC2, will it give us a result? But point is, it's going to run your command. It will tell you whatever issues you need to fix or whatever, but it's going to run your command. And when you start using the AWS CLI, you start to see, you see it gave us empty. We don't have anything in AWS, so it's empty. But I don't need to go to AWS, go to EC2, start checking snapshots and see what is there. With this, I already know it's empty straight away. So as you get familiar with your AWS CLI, you start to see that, okay, there's a pattern. You call the AWS name, you write the name of the service you want to get a result on, or you want to run a command on, and then you run the commands that you want to work with. So it's simple like that, and we can get started with it. This is the AWS CLI. We're already past our time, and I hope next week you'll be joining us and we can get started with actually working with AWS services, since we have all our accounts set up now. There's the AWS SDK, and then there's the AWS console that we can use apart from the AWS CLI. So that's like 3 avenues that we're going to be touching on at different points at different times. We can mix and match. And I wish you a nice evening. Thank you for joining us today, and bye.